You have now tapped in with the introspective father and son duo. Last name may be strange, but never strangers to the game. Adjust the listening devices and keep it live.
Coming in, flex. I just wanna win, LABB, who we running with, 2233, I'm on 10 again, state your name.
Hello, and welcome to another installment of No Strangers to the Game. I'm Ja, and that's Troy, and today's episode, we're going to be bringing you just kind of some of our opinions and views on Black History Month, how it should be celebrated, how it should be taught, and some of the ways we've learned it in the past. To get us started this week, though, just as we always do, if you give me a short recap of your week or things that are coming up in this coming week that you think our audience should hear about.
My week was pretty straightforward, not too much high or low, just kind of a routine week. I did, was tuning in to what was going on with the storm throughout the Midwest, and that was heading to the east, but in particular, Texas. And so, I want to definitely send my thoughts and prayers out to the families and individuals there who really had to struggle through that, having no power, lack of running water, and just the scenes that I saw in the news and on TV that were a little disturbing. But I think now things are coming back to form, to normal, and hopefully they can recover soon and get back to, living their day-to-day lives as normal as possible. Overall, much hasn't changed in my world. Just continuing to do the daily routine and figure out how to move things forward in a way that's going to be very productive and beneficial.
Yeah, for me, this week was about patience. And what I mean by that is I had a track meet this weekend. I had some homework assignments and stuff due. And I'm realizing I'm a type of person that I don't always fully love the process. I kind of want to get to the result very fast. I want to be where I want to be. I don't want to sit there and do the homework, but I want to have an A. And so with track and field this week, I wouldn't say I had a tough meet, but I wasn't where I wanted to be, especially because I had waited so long to compete. And so I just kind of realizing that there's a patience element to it, and it's going to come around and it'll all come together when it needs to. And so, yeah, that's kind of it for me this week. Today's topic, we're talking about Black history. It is currently Black History Month, and it's weird because it's different because I'm not in elementary school. I think in college, unless you're in a class that has to do with history or African-American history or African history or anything like that, I don't think there's any coverage of it. You may see a few things on campus celebrating it, but nothing you're learning about. But I know in grade school, middle school, high school, it was very different in terms of the way, when February came around, they tried to celebrate it. I want to get your perspective on, first of all, the significance for you of Black History Month. And I know you have some interesting perspectives. So,
I think it's significant from the standpoint that from in the early part of the century, 20th century, Carter G. Woodson was the father or founder of Black History Week, and then he expanded it to Black History Month. One of the reasons I know he chose February, I think it was because of Lincoln's birthday, and the other significant reason, I want to say, was it Frederick Douglass' birthday? I'm not 100% sure, but it was based around historical figures and why it was done in February. It was significant at the time that he did it with much of the resistance and much of the turmoil and viewpoints of African Americans and Black folks in the country at that time. So for him to be able to initiate a week that turned into a month, I think is huge and significant. And I think it's now time for us to turn into Black History Year, because Black history didn't happen in 1 month. It happens every day. And Black history is a part of American history. Black history is a part of world history. So it's time to continue to infuse it into our everyday lives, just like anything else, because it's important to change the narrative on how our images and how people view us and how we view ourselves. There's a lot of positive stories, positive messages and just historical facts that are significant. And I think it's important for not only Black children and Black people, but the world to know and understand, because you're leaving out a part of your own legacy, a part of your own history when you don't share that. And, you know, if you just relegate it to, oh, the Black community, that's what they're going to learn. But it's significant for all of us to really understand our true history and be able to gain from that. So I think that we continue to make it a part of our everyday conversations, make it a part of our everyday, you know, function, just as anything else. You know, it shouldn't be something that has to be singled out and to be acknowledged, but it should be just a part of every day. When we're talking about George Washington, we're talking about George Washington Carver, we're talking about any other historical figure in history. Black history should be discussed in the same context.
Yeah, when you ask me the significance of Black history, it's funny because I say it, and I don't know how to phrase this, but it's almost like there is no significance because Black history is history. It's not, you know, and it is personally, obviously, our history, but it's so much greater than just Black history because it bleeds over into so many other cultures. So it has great significance because it encompasses so much. And so for me, that question is always interesting. Like, what's the significance? Well, I'd say just as significant. And that's the thing, right? If it's just as significant as every other history, then don't they all have no significance and they're just history?
Well, it's a part of how we learn. You know, let's say history is best qualified to teach us, you know, what to do in the future, right? So we can't leave bits and pieces out of it and trying to solve future problems because we've all been a part of it. It's like waking up one day and being a part of our family. That history is no longer told. You know, like, wow, that was 3 of y'all. There were 3 kids. What happened to this one person? You know, that information is just gone. And so that's what is part of the American fabric, is to be able to share the whole history, the truth of it. It doesn't make America any worse than or any better. It's just, this is what it is. This is what happened. And I think we need to look at it in that context. There was a lot of negative things that went on, but there was a lot of positive things that went on that should be shared as well. So history is just what it is. It's a snapshot of what happened in a moment in time that, you know, it just, those are the events. Now they can be shared, you know, from different perspectives, but, you know, I think they should be shared in a way that, you know, is balanced and that tells a story in a way that, you know, that's truthful.
Yeah. The next thing I wanted to ask you is, I think it's clear how African-American children or African-Americans in general can benefit from learning about Black history. It's their history, it's their culture. It can give them a sense of pride. It can do a lot for someone to learn their history. But do you think people of all cultures and all races can benefit from learning and knowing Black history?
Yeah, I think what it does is it removes that blind spot that many people have when it comes to African Americans, because typically the narrative or the images you get are, you know, someone being an athlete, an entertainer, or, you know, a criminal. You know, those are kind of the images for the most part that we get, and they can share and open and broaden their viewpoints and perspectives on us. That way we can all begin to see how we can make this as a better country, and sharing our experiences and understanding one another in a way that, you know, we're not walking around with these misconceptions and these ideas that create tension, that create discomfort, and that makes it difficult to move beyond, you know, the challenges that this country has had with racism over the, you know, centuries. So I think it helps us to heal. It helps us to deal with things that we may not have understood, and just to be open and honest, stripped down naked, and say, this is who we are. How do we move forward? And I think we're in a time and space, particularly in this country, where that is definitely necessary. You know, all of it is not going to be good. All of it is not going to be bad. It's just going to be what is. Let's deal with the facts and let's move on and figure out how to make this country live up to the ideals that it espouses.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, I mean, it's, once again, it's if we agree that Black history is just as significant as any other history, and we agree that history is something that can help us, you know, stop from repeating our mistakes, we can learn from our past, then why wouldn't Black history be something that everybody should learn from, or everybody can gain knowledge from? And then, like you said, you can learn a lot about people you probably didn't understand. And once again, that can help us kind of, I guess, come together. And that can create some sense of community because we understand the circumstances of why people are the way they are, how they act the way they act, and things like that. But I think the greater, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and for Black people in particular, I know you touched on it, you know, lightly, but just having a sense of pride and awareness of where you came from and the things that you people in your culture and from your race has done, you know, it helped me when I was going through college. I took some African studies classes in which woke me up to things that I didn't know, and it gave me a deeper sense of understanding and perspective on our community and our culture. And it made me proud. It made me want to go out and do the best I can to be the best, because there were so many people who made so many sacrifices for me to even be able to sit in that classroom and get that information. And so it's just something that sparked a fuse and made me want to be the best that I can be. And I think that's something that most of us, if not all of us, you know, could use in our daily lives, knowing that where we come from and the people that we come from are significant. And it did start at slavery. You know, we started as kings and queens and people who did, you know, wonderful things and creating civilizations that we talk about still to this day. So I think it's something that really is necessary to infuse that pride and that sense of significance that you have.
Yeah. And my next question off of that was going to be, so all of those things you mentioned are great, and you're absolutely right. But I think for me, it's always been a point of tension is, can everyone teach Black history? So for me personally, I grew up and I didn't have I don't think I had any Black teachers until college. So every Black History Month, I was learning Black history, at least in school wise, from, you know, teachers that didn't look like me or weren't from the same background. And I was in a classroom full of kids that oftentimes weren't the same background as me as well. And it always creates this point of tension when I know people always joke about it, you know, when you're the one Black kid in class and they're talking about, you know, Black history, and everybody just turns around and looks at you. But it really does. I mean, you're talking about traumatic events. You're learning slavery and, you know, the civil rights movements, things like that from people who have no idea what it was like. And not that I was there, but that trauma is definitely passed down through, you know, the generations. And so I guess, I mean, at the end of the day, I was taught Black history by teachers in school, but luckily, you know, you and Mom did a great job of making sure me and my sisters understood Black history, and we got a much greater, you know, idea of Black history and what it was. But I'm just wondering, in terms of in school, I'm not saying we shouldn't allow others to teach it, but is it beneficial to learn Black history from somebody who isn't Black?
Well, I mean, like I said, it's history, you know, so if you're teaching the facts and you're being balanced and sharing the information, and if it's written in a way that it's, you know, it's truthful, anyone can teach it. Now, everyone may not have the same empathy or sympathy for those experiences because they may not have, you know, experienced those things. But I think that everyone can teach it as long as they're being honest and open, and you know, their intent is to give the facts and to share it with, you know, the classroom or whomever they're teaching it to. Sometimes it comes a little different, particularly the way history is taught, particularly in elementary school, where it's mostly on a traumatic experience of slavery. There's a lot of experiences that were positive throughout Black history in this country. There's what we call Black Wall Street, you know, a Black community that was formed in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That was a very wealthy and thriving community. There's other historical events and historical figures that done some really wonderful things, and where, regardless of who tells that story, you're not going to feel shame or feel uncomfortable because it's something that stands out, that'll make you feel proud and make others look and say, wow, that's cool. This guy, George Washington Carvey, took the peanut and had many different inventions out of that. George Washington Carver, as I understand, was the one who taught Henry Ford the whole assembly line process to where he began to mass produce cars in the way that he did. So there's a lot of things that when you get that information, won't make you feel ashamed or feel less than. It makes you stand up and say, wow, I come from a history of people that have done great things just as well as any other group in culture.
And see, that's why I brought up the question of, can Black history be taught by others who aren't Black? Is because I got all of those things, but like you said, in school, it's always been taught if you've got slavery and Martin Luther King. Those are the main two things when we're talking about Black History Month. And I think if we actually had Black administrators, Black teachers, and things like that, that curriculum may change and we may get a lot of those aspects that you were talking about. But I guess the question is, can you expect others to try to implement these things and help out your community, or do you have to do it yourself? A lot like you and Mom did with teaching, me and my sisters at home.
I think it's both. I think you make those demands when you're in a position to do so, but you also take on the responsibility to teach that and share that information amongst ourselves and with whomever is interested in understanding it and learning it. But I think it's two-part. We force the school systems, or we demand the school systems to teach it, to share the history. I mean, it's really American history. It's not just Black history, it's the American history, and share all of it in a balanced way, not just slavery and the negative aspects of it, but all the good that comes along with it. And at the same time, it's incumbent upon us as African-American or Blacks to be able to share that information amongst ourselves, teach our children so that they know that and they grow up with a sense of pride and understanding of who they are.
Yeah, and that's the key. I think if you do that at home, then I think all of, what happens in the classroom, doesn't have as much of an effect. But I think for the kids who don't get as much, supplemented history at home, that can take a negative effect on them being taught by others and the curriculum being shaped to where it kind of paints a negative view. But like you said, I do think it is important to understand some of the trauma and some of the, unfortunate things that happened as well. But I just wish it was a little bit more balanced.
Yeah, and I know that the state of California is looking at and changing the curriculum, infusing more cultural history. And I can't remember the term. I don't know what is that, but the infusing more history and information on the various cultures, including Black history. So we'll see what that looks like. Hopefully it touches on the things that, we need, and that's balanced and going to be informative, but significant from the standpoint of help lifting Black children to be proud of who they are and where they come from. And also just sharing with others to show that, some of the things you see on TV, we're more than that. We've done more, and we're, much, much greater than what sometimes we're shown to be.
Yeah. My next question is, as we have Black History Month, and I think a lot of Black people are appreciative, but there's a question of, is Black History Month necessary, right? I mean, if we are trying to ingrain Black history into our culture as a whole, we shouldn't have to set aside a month for it. And not only that, but it shouldn't be limited to that month to where we learn about it. It should just be, everyday thing. When we're learning about history, it's infused. It's a part of it because it's a part of our history in general. I know it shouldn't be limited to Black History Month, and I would hope that, we're doing everything we can to make sure it's not. But does doing away with Black History Month try to help that cause, or does it hurt it? Because obviously having the month, I feel like people may say, well, we got y'all month, we did y'all history for that month, cool, we can book it and put it away. But at the same time, if we don't have the month, will we just be, brushed under the rug?
Well, I think having the month is significant because it's a placeholder that we know, okay, at least this time of year, we're going to get that information. We're going to share these experiences. There's going to be commercials, there'll be movies, there'll be different events and activities that will highlight Black history and the things that were accomplished. But I think we still need to push forward just being something as common as a discussion on any other topic that we have in school or in our day-to-day lives. It, not just relegated to the month. But I think the month is a great start, and it's something that allows people to focus in, even if it's on a short period of time, to see those accomplishments and be able to have a better understanding of the community and culture. But, year round, Black history is, didn't happen in 30 days. It's happened over the history of the world, and it's still happening. And so it needs to be, something that's a part of everyday fabric of our society.
So then the question becomes, and I guess this can be a point of tension, is the hope that we get to a point where we don't need Black History Month? And then if we do say we got to that point, I feel like it'd be a point of tension if we were to disband Black History Month. That we're not doing that no more.
I mean, if we got to the point when we didn't need it, I think it'd be great. It's like anything else. If we got to the point in our society where we didn't need jails, that would be great. If we got to the point in our society where we didn't need social welfare, and aid because people are functioning and doing things that they don't need it, that would be great. So I would say, yeah, if we ever got to the point where it wasn't necessary to have Black History Month. But what is the criteria and what does that look like? That's a whole discussion that we don't have time to go into in this session. But yeah, we definitely want to evolve to that point to where, it's not something that we have to set aside to celebrate.
Yeah, and I totally agree. But once again, regardless of whether we are actually reached that point and can definitively say, yeah, we don't need Black History Month anymore, if you try to take it away, it will probably be some interesting effects of that. But yeah, we won't get into that right now.
Yeah, well, I was listening off having the need for it. Yeah. I still think there's a need for it.
Yeah.
And like with anything, like you mentioned, if you're used to having something and it's taken away, it creates a problem because you're like, wait a minute, why are you removing that?
Exactly.
But the fact that we wouldn't need it sometime in the future is the hope and is the intent that we get to a place where it's not something that's necessary in that regard.
Yeah. The last thing I kind of wanted to get into is, I guess you could say, who or what historical figures or events have most inspired you. I mean, obviously, I think you've learned a lot about Black history. I've learned a lot about Black history throughout our lives. But I do think there are a few instances personally that I can look back on, or people that really inspire me because they look like me and they were able to accomplish or overcome great things.
For me, it's two things as I think about it. Because of what I do and what I have a passion for, community economic development, the story of Black Wall Street has always fascinated me and has inspired me that, okay, this can actually happen in a Black community where it's thriving, where it's prosperous, and where you have the things that you need to be effective and productive in your community. Unlike many Black communities today and historically where that hasn't always been the case. So being in community economic development, that inspired me, and I looked at that and I see what are the things that they did at those times to make this community function and work the way it did. Another thing is Marcus Garvey and the Marcus Garvey movement and how he was able to galvanize millions of Black people throughout the globe. There was no internet. The technology was pretty limited, but within a short span of 3 or 4 years, he was able to galvanize millions of people to be able to form the UNIA, United Negro Improvement Association, in the early 1900s, I think 1917s, 18, somewhere in that time, to where he could galvanize that many people across the globe to focus on issues and challenges in the community or in the African diaspora. That's hard to do today, with the technology. Imagine in the early 1900s, someone being able to do that in those times when there was a lot of racism and animosity toward, Black people, for him to be able to do that. So those are two events that I look at, or situations and instances that I look at, and I think, wow, if we can just if we can just replicate those two things today, we would be huge. We could do some really huge things moving forward.
Yeah, for me, I have two events and one person that I think I can always look back on. Number one is Jesse Owens. I think, that Olympics where it was in Berlin, Germany, Hitler's regime was in power. And, Hitler made the statement that his Aryan race was going to win all the gold medals. They were the best athletes, the superior human race. And Jesse Owens went in there and shut all that down. I don't know exactly all the events he won, but I believe he won the 100, the 200, was a part of the winning 4x1 and won the long jump, I believe.
Yeah, it was four medals.
4 medals. So, that right there is something I look at, and it was kind of it's inspiring, but it was also just a really cool moment. And you learn about it in history. It's like, yeah, we shut that down, player. That ain't how we rolling.
Somebody need to go fact check Hitler.
Yeah. And then the second one is also another track and field event. The John Carlos and Tommy Smith in the 1968 Olympics, in protest of, racial injustice, put black gloves on when they were on the podium at the, this is the Olympics. This is the global stage, and they raised their black fists in the air. And I think it's a historical, I think everybody can understand the historical, prominence of that event, but I think it's proximity. I've been able to meet John Carlos and speak with him. I read his book that a friend of ours wrote. And so I think to see something that's been such a big, figure and a big image in Black history, and then to be able to meet the guy who was behind it and hear his story and hear the things he went through because of it and how he overcame those challenges to be where he is today, it's just always been inspiring to me, especially because I can just look him in the eyes and be like, wow, that's that guy. And then the last one is LeBron James. Listen. LeBron, I think, is the greatest athlete of all time, but I do think, and it's funny because when Black history is happening, I doubt it, right? I think when people were marching with Martin Luther King, I don't think they were like, man, people are going to look back on this in 50 years and say this was a huge deal, but they were just marching because it was what, they felt they needed to do. Now we look at it and say that was huge and that meant a lot and stuff like that. I think what LeBron James is doing as a Black athlete in America is momentous. It's different than what other athletes have done, because we've had, obviously prominent, rich Black athletes who've been successful in business and stuff like that. But I think the way he's doing it, the way he's going about it, and the way he's changing some of the rules and the game and the structure for people who look like him and people that, are of, light complexion, I think that's Black history happening. And in 50 years, I think we'll look back and be like, wow, that was crazy. Some of the things he's doing with, just in basketball alone, in terms of the player empowerment. And I think it's not racial, but it is, right? I don't know the exact number, but I know when I watch basketball, there's a lot of brothers on the court. It looks like a lot of
about 80% in the NBA, close to it, if not more.
Exactly. So when you talk about him having power of the collective bargaining agreement, and, him and Chris Paul, kind of taking over the NBA Players Association, and the way he's set up rules for player empowerment in terms of, at the end of the day, if I want to move, if I want to take my commodity that I have right now and move it somewhere else, as opposed to, generally white general managers and owners saying this is what's going to happen to you. It's not racial once again, but I do think you can look at it and say that's momentous. And what it signifies to me is that we're starting to understand the power that we have. And not only that, but we're going to use it. And I think that's why LeBron means a lot to me, and that is huge for me in terms of Black history.
All right. Well, it comes down to empowerment.
Yeah.
And empowerment is something that we definitely, it can't be given to you. It can't be handed off. It's something that you just have to assume and take. Yeah. And so it appears that in many instances, in many places, that is happening. And I think with LeBron in the election, and how we feel about politics and, elections. But I think just on the surface, what they were able to do to get the owners to open up those arenas, and in conjunction with working with people that were on the ground organizing, like the Stacey Abrams and those type of people who were able to, get people to the polls that typically wouldn't go, and have places for them, and really eliminate and reduce the number of barriers that people would typically have going out to vote, waiting in long lines and those type of things. And because of the pandemic, that made things even more challenging. but for them to be able to organize and leverage themselves, himself, as well as other athletes, to say, this is what we want, and we're going to expect you to do these things, and have the owners, do those things that were asked and requested, I think is a big deal. And I think I can see a shift in moving forward, but we have to continue to be diligent and vigilant about making sure that things are done and done right, and holding ourselves accountable as well as everyone else.
Yeah. My last words on the topic are, if you are not Black, I think it's important to understand Black history and to get an understanding of why things are the way they are, how things have gotten to this point. And just, I don't think you have to do anything. You don't have to, help out anybody in Black History Month. You don't have to open the door for Black people during Black History Month. But it's just to have that understanding, because once we get into that, I think that brings a bit of a unity to our community, and that's huge. Matter of fact, you can't spell community without unity. So if you aren't Black, I think that's your role in Black History Month, is to learn as much as you can and understand why things are the way they are, and understand that Black history is a part of American history and the world's history as a whole. And if you are Black, then I think use this month to, once again, just like everyone else, learn, understand how we got to where we are, what we had to overcome to get here, and the power that you have because of it. And with that being said, you were Black, so you're creating Black history every day, and so act accordingly.
Yeah, no truer words have been spoken, at least today anyway. So, yeah, well, I think that's solid feedback. And, I think as I see our society and the transition and the shifts that are being made, I'm optimistic. I'm very optimistic on one hand. On the other hand, I see some things that cause some concern, and it's just a matter of sitting down and being truthful and honest and dealing with the elephant in the room. Things have happened over time in history that wasn't pleasant. None of us was there to be a part of it, but we are either benefiting from it or being impacted by it today. Now, how do we deal with it and address it in a way that we can move forward to improve the relationships, improve the future of this country? Because if we continue functioning the way that we are, this country will not be the country that we remember it. It will be one of those that kind of like the Roman Empire. It was a dynasty, it was a strong empire, but it didn't last because it was destroyed from within, the internal conflicts, and largely due to racism and greed and economics. We can avoid, I said we can avoid that from happening, but we all got to sit down and put ourselves in a space to deal with it, and just be open and honest with it, and rely on the truth to take us where we need to go.
Yep. Well, with that being said, I think that wraps up this episode, and honestly wraps up Black History Month. Hope it was a good one. And once again, don't let it just be the month. We take Black history and we carry it through the rest of the year. So with that being said, we appreciate you guys for tuning into this episode and past and hopefully future episodes. And hope you have a good one.
All right. Peace. Black History 365.
Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you're notified every time we post a video.